In a world where 99% of people are desperately trying to fit in, the 1% understand that success is found when you stand out from the crowd. I'm Jack Henderson, and this is the Flamingo Sundays podcast. If you're looking for the 99%, you're in the wrong place. Today on the Flamingo Sundays podcast, we have one of Australia's greatest business minds in David Shein. David founded one of Australia's first ever unicorn companies, which is a company valued at over $1 billion in the name of Comtech. He exited out of Comtech in 2001 at over $1.1 billion, and since then has spent the last 2 decades mentoring and investing in exceptional startups, with a number of them being successful exits. David is also the author of the book The Dumbest Guy at the Table: How I Founded Australia's First Unicorn. And in that book, he draws on his experience to provide valuable advice to anyone looking to start a company. And in today's episode, we'll unpack all of that and much more. David Shein. Jack Welch famously said, "Face reality as it is, not as it was, or how you wish it should be." What comes to mind when you hear that?
Yeah, I think it's true in so many different aspects of one's life that a lot of people don't want to face up to reality, don't make the changes. It could be a bad relationship, it could be a poor business decision that you made, and often people procrastinate on decisions that the sooner you face up to reality, the better it ultimately is for you. And
why do you think that is?
The world moves at an unbelievably fast pace today, faster today than ever. And as an old guy, probably the oldest guy you've ever interviewed, I think things change that quickly. And if you keep living in the past, you're not going to be able to adapt to the future. And it's people that are able to adapt and transition their lives, whether it's in a career, whether it's making sure you're re-educating yourself to get the necessary skills, to be competitive. You've got to keep investing and make changes before you have to.
And do you think that even when people know that they've made the wrong decision, a lot of people don't want to face the reality because that then makes them feel like they've potentially failed or they're a failure?
Yeah, definitely. I think everybody makes wrong decisions. I can say in my business career, I'll never forget somebody told me I've made lots of bad business decisions, which I did. But I always say lucky the few good ones I made outweighed all the bad ones that I made. And I think I read Frank Lowy's book, and funny enough, it was after someone had said that I'd made lots of bad business decisions, and it really upset me. And I read Frank Lowy's book, and probably you may not be aware, but in the late 80s, Frank Lowy bought Channel 10. And Alan Bond bought Channel 9 from the Packer family, and to own a TV station was the ultimate business success in the late 80s. And the Lowys bought Channel 10, and it was a disaster. And when I asked Frank Lowy, they said, "Do you regret buying Channel 10?" He said, "If I didn't take risks, I'd still be selling salami in Blacktown." So you've got to take risks, and in order to succeed. But I think it's really important that when you have failed, that you move on quickly from those failures and make sure you recover quickly.
And learn.
If
I was to ask that same question to young, teenage David Shein, do you think you would have answered it differently?
Well, I think when you're young, you think you're immortal and nothing can go wrong. I think I probably thought, being young, I think you're naive, and I always say if someone presented my business plan when I started my own business to me today as a venture capital company, that's you're out of your head. So when you're naive, and I think it's a big advantage. I think you often see it with young sports people. They go and debut, have an amazing get a century on debut or get a lot of wickets on debut, and because they're fearless. And I think that's the benefit of inexperience and youth. But nobody is immune from making mistakes, and if you surf, you're going to fall, and you've got to be you've got to be willing to get back on the board and know what you did wrong if you missed the if you missed the wave or whatever, and that's life in general.
Love that. If we unpack your younger years, because I'm assuming younger life is very different to life as we know it now. What did life look like growing up in South Africa?
Yeah, growing up as a white person in South Africa was an extremely privileged and an unnatural way of living. You know, I always say if the gross domestic product of a country is $100, and you've got 50 million people who live there, but you only share the wealth amongst 5 million. You have unbelievable facilities, unbelievable hospitals, unbelievable. Our public schools were as good as Cranbrook's and Scots colleges over here. Amazing facilities, because the majority of the population were deprived of some of the benefits and the infrastructure that they should have got, electricity and basic necessities. So growing up as a white in South Africa was a privileged life, and but it was not a sustainable way of life, and that's why South Africa ended up the way it did. And I always say Nelson Mandela, in my opinion, I can't think of any world leaders who really cared about the people more than his own sense of power. And I never, if somebody had said to me when I emigrated from South Africa in 1986 that the white government will hand the keys over of the country over to Mandela, I would have thought you had been drinking this morning, because I just never thought in my lifetime. I thought there'd be a civil war and a bloodbath, and it was an unbelievable transition of power, and Mandela did an unbelievable job of uniting the country.
And do you think that upbringing give you a perspective on life that you potentially may not have had, say, if you grew up in Australia?
Well, I think really what it teaches you is that it's really important to know that no one person is more important than any other person, irrespective of their race, their religion, their creed, their gender, or whatever. And I think it's I love having. I remember when you went to a beach in Australia, and I've got my eldest kid is now 37, and what I loved about it is I used to think my kids are colorblind. They'd go to the beach, and as kids do, they just sit and play with other kids. And I think it's we live in an amazing multicultural country, and I always say, I really feel grateful that I came. I always say that I caught the plane coming this way and not the other way, which was the option was to go to the States, and I'm even more grateful today when you see what a mess that is today. But and I think Australia's done an amazing job, and I think gives anybody a go. I always say Aussies give anybody a go if you do what you say, but bullshit once, and you've lost it, and that's a pretty fair. Pretty fair way of doing business.
I agree. And from my observation, I think that people who don't grow up in Australia or wouldn't, have Australian parents and they usually immigrate, tend to do usually much better commercially than Australians do. And I'm not sure why that is. Probably work ethic, probably perspective. Coming from South Africa, I know a lot of ultra successful South Africans and people who work extremely hard. When you come to Australia, does it feel like it's a new start and that you have to make the most of it? Or does it feel like it's easy?
Business is never easy. It's in all the time I ran my own business, and even what I do today, it's never I often say that someone once said to me, Dave, I'm worried you look tired, and I said you should worry when I don't look tired. And as long as you care about what you're doing, you're going to be thinking about what you can be doing better for your customers, what you can be doing better for your staff. So business is never easy, and I bust my butt. For 14 years when I ran my company, I was working. I was out for breakfast, I was out for dinners, I was out I wasn't working 8-hour days. Often today I think people say they want a work-life balance, and I have a work-life balance today because of the investment that I made in the first 14 years of my life. I think a lot of people, one of my eldest son's friend one day came and said, "Dave, I want a life like you." I said to him, "Sean," I said, "I didn't always have this work-life balance." I said, the investment that I made in the first 14 years, I would never, ever be able to be doing what I did today, including, as I said to you before we started this podcast, taking my family of 10 of us going to Bali for an amazing holiday. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't put in that investment between the years of 26 and 40. And so that's why I have a work-life balance. It doesn't just happen. You can't look at that work-life balance on a day-to-day basis. You have to look at it over a much longer period of time.
How come you just didn't go into a job?
I did. I did go into a job, and that was my lucky break. I had a bad job, and when I say I had a bad job, I didn't have my own company in South Africa. I worked for Pricewaterhouse, and I loved my job. I worked as hard at Pricewaterhouse as I did when I ran my own business, because I really felt valued and I really felt respected by my boss at Pricewaterhouse. He gave me lots of opportunity, lots of leeway, which was amazing for a young article clerk. He allowed me to start a microcomputer division, and I'm going back to 1981, 82, where computers weren't pervasive like they are today, and really gave me, he backed me, and I loved what I did. When I came to Australia, I took a job as the national sales manager of a software company. I thought, wow, I've hit the jackpot. I've come from being a clerk in South Africa at Pricewaterhouse to national sales manager of this technology company. But I was paid badly. I had absolutely no say in what I did. And I don't know if you or any of your listeners have ever had a job where it almost feels like you're getting pushed out the door to go to work. And I had absolutely no job satisfaction. And I always looked at that and said, sometimes you can look at bad experiences and make a positive out of that. And to me, everything I learned about managing people, I'd never hired a person in my life until I started my own company, was if I hated being paid badly, having no say in what I did, felt like coming to work was like an absolute chore. If I ever hired someone, I want to make sure that they loved coming to work, that I recognize them both financially and in other ways for the contribution that they made to the company. And if they had some valuable ideas, that I was going to listen to those, listen to their input. And I can honestly say that 99% of the good ideas at Comtech, which was my company, came from people other than me, because I listened to how we could be doing things better.
And it probably resonates with the title of your book.
Exactly. So the title of my book, for just in case your listeners haven't heard, is called The Dumbest Guy at the Table. And somebody actually sent me a photo last night from Sydney Airport and said, "Geez, Dave, I see your book's number 24 in the bestseller list." So like any competitive salesperson, I looked to see what was number one. I didn't see what was number one, but number two was Surrounded by Idiots. So I'm not sure. So maybe it's better to be surrounded by idiots than the dumbest guy at the table.
Do you think if you had a positive experience and you were led by your leader when you come to Australia, like it sounds like you led your people, that you would have started the company?
I would almost be 100% sure that I would not be sitting in front of you today if I had a good job when I first arrived in Australia. I was a new migrant. I had a wife and a young kid, and taking that risk of starting on my own was a big risk. And but I was on $2,000 a month, and I figured, would I back myself to earn at least $2,000 a month, because that was my opportunity cost. That was the cost, my cost of saying, and because that opportunity cost was so low, I thought if I've ever wanted to start a business, there would never ever be a better chance for me to have a go than what it is now, because I'm not giving up that much. And so I'm extremely grateful for that first job that I had in Australia.
That's very interesting, because you see with most people when they start businesses, or want to start businesses, they don't do it when they're young, because it's all about, living an incredible young life and doing all the things that you want to do when you're young. But it sounds like your perspective on that was, at that time in your life, you probably had, it was still a lot of risk, but the least amount of risk and the least amount of opportunity cost. And if you would have progressed in your career and started to earn more money and have more responsibility and more debts and all the other things that come with life, it would have been much harder to take that leap.
And for good reason. That's why it's called golden handcuffs. When you work in a company like a Macquarie Bank or a Canva or a Google, and you're getting this huge salary with stock options or whatever, it's like, if I give that up, my quality of life's going to change. For me, it was so there's different stages. Someone could have left an Atlassian and done really, really well from their stock options and said, now I'm financially secure, I can have a go. Or when you have nothing to lose, which is really where I was in my career. I had absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain. And I was offered a job, by the way, by one of my customers for $4,000 a month. And
which is double your existing salary.
Which was double my existing salary. And I said to him, it was a guy, Gary Buttsworth, from a company called Logical Solutions, and I really liked him. And I said, Gary, I've always wanted to try something on my own. If it doesn't work out, I won't be too proud to come and see you for a job, and I hope you won't be too proud to give me that job. And that goes back to face reality as it is, not as it was or as you wish it to be. Because I really was, I think I'd say, big enough to recognize that if it wasn't going to work, I wouldn't be too proud to say, why the hell do I want to earn $2,000 for the rest of my days when I can go and get $4,000 from Gary, who's a really nice guy at Logical Solutions. So that was, when your opening remark was face reality as it is, not as it was or you wish it to be. Once again, I apologize for referring to my book. I always say, my dad used to say to me, rather earn 50 cents for yourself than $1 from somebody else. And I always say that's the exact opposite advice that I give my 3 boys. Why would you want all the stress and aggravation of running your own business to struggle when you could go and get a job at some amazing companies, Australian companies today, like, as I say, Macquarie Banks or Canvas or Atlassians or WiseTechs, or there's so many amazing companies who really take care of their staff, from every perspective. And however, I always say, if any of my boys wanted to start a business, I would back them to the hilt. But I would say, if after a reasonable period of time, you're not earning at least as much as you would on a job, and 2, you're not building an asset that you can sell one day, don't waste your bloody time. And I think I realized that, as a young 26-year-old, that if I could feel that it wasn't going to work out, I'd go and get a job. I wouldn't have been too proud to say, gave it a go, didn't work out, go get a job.
So would you say that not every single person is destined to be an entrepreneur or run a business?
Yeah, definitely. I think, Ian Chappell, who was the former captain of the Australian cricket team, probably arguably Australia's greatest captain, he actually wrote the foreword to my book. I'll never forget, he did a session for our team on leadership, and I'll never forget, he said, 99% of people are born to be led. But it doesn't mean that not everybody suits to starting their own company. I think what people need to understand is what they're really, really good at. And there's no one that I've ever met that's good at everything. And, where I think entrepreneurs or people sometimes make mistakes is they think they're good at everything. And I really believe that the best businesses often are a combination or a team of people. So while you may not be the best person, you may have a tech person who's an amazing technical vision of where they want to take the business, but they don't really want to go out and win business. And you need both. It's like in a restaurant. No use having an amazing chef with crap service. Likewise, you could have the best front of house in a restaurant serving crap food, and you may give the restaurant another go, but after 2 or 3 bad meals, you're not going to go back again. So in business, every business is the same. You need someone who's going to do the interview, and you need Joel who's going to be doing the technical stuff and making sure it comes out clearly, and that's why it works, and that's what any entrepreneur needs to say. What am I good at? What's my superpower? And what skills do I need to bring in to complement the skills that I have? So I think it's a really important thing for an entrepreneur to say, if I can't do it all myself, let me find some like-minded people who've got complementary skills who can add value to what I think could be an amazing business.
Which you talk about a lot in your book around, you that's the title of the book, right? The Dumbest Guy in the Room.
Yep.
And it's about having incredible people around you that are, probably much smarter at their thing than you are. Let's run through the business which, you made a very successful exit out of, which was Comtech.
Yep.
You started that business when you were 26.
Yep.
How long have you been in Australia for before you started that?
About 9 months. So I arrived in November, and I started in July '87.
So it only took 6 months for you to work out that the job wasn't right.
Yeah, pretty much.
And when you started the business, what was your superpower? Like what was the thing that drove you to go, okay, well, I'm very good at this, or I believe that I can do this better than my competitors?
I think I'm a really good salesperson. I think and I think in business, especially as an entrepreneur and as a founder, you're always selling. You're selling, trying to win those first few customers when you're working out of a tiny little office and your competitor's a public company, a successful public company, trying to convince, I'm clueless technically. I always say if I change a plug at home, my wife takes the family outside in case I blow the house apart. So how was I going to be able to convince an amazing technical person to come and join the company? Because I knew to be successful, I needed to be have an amazing technical team to support me, and then I had to sell to the biggest US suppliers, and to convince them to give a 1 or 2 man band distribution rights for some of the hottest companies in the world at the time. So that's what I think I was good at. I still think I'm good at that. That's what I do for a living today. We have founders pitching to us in a venture capital company. I see money as a commodity. You can get money from, there's probably 100 different venture capital companies in Australia today and we have to convince founders why we are better value to work with than anyone else in the industry, not just because of the cash we provide, but because of the value that we're going to provide to help them build and grow their businesses.
Number one salesman.
That's my job.
and Comtech, for people who don't know, was an early tech company, but a little bit different to tech companies as we know them today.
It's hard to explain to your audience, because in my day, as I said, computers weren't pervasive. They weren't in every home. They weren't on every desktop. And I got in really, really early, and networking started taking off, where you'd start connecting a couple of PCs in an office to share a laser printer, and it was called local area networking.
This is before Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, right?
What? Yeah, exactly. So definitely, it was using cables to connect your computers and modems in some cases, and so it's technology that, and that's why I think that's what's kept me excited, is that this is an industry that's forever changing. People are talking about artificial intelligence today, because of ChatGPT, and in 5 years' time there'll be something new. There's always something new, and that's why I say you have to make sure that you keep re-engineering yourself and re-educating yourself just to make sure that you can stay relevant. And so we got into the industry at that time. It was one of the really early waves. There's different waves. There was the mainframe era, then the mini computer era, then the personal computer era, then the local area networking, and that's the area that I got involved with, and was a massive growth area at the time where people were actually getting rid of mainframe computers and mini computers to replace them with personal computers. And then after about 10 years of starting Comtech, the next big wave was the internet. And so I was really, really early. We were, there's a famous entrepreneur and now venture capitalist, Mark Andreessen. He actually invented the browser. And so we were the first distributor for Netscape in Australia, which really was, the internet had been around for many, many years. And but it wasn't usable to probably any of us. You had to have like I remember when I hired my first technical person was the guy Nathan Scher, who joined in 1988.
Is this the gentleman that had the earring?
No, that was Dave Colvin. So Nathan joined, and I said, we need to get some more tech guys. He said, I'll just get onto the internet. And I remember getting on, like, typing all sorts of, like, it was, like almost computer code to trying to find some guys at uni who may be interested in coming to work as tech guys.
This is before things like Google and...
Well, it was before the browser, because Google only came after the browser changed everything, because it made it unbelievably easy for people, everyday people like ourselves, to be able to search the web or use the internet. And I already see ChatGPT is, artificial intelligence has been around for many, many years, but I think ChatGPT is to artificial intelligence what Netscape or the browser was to the internet. So we got into the internet really early in 1996, and then I sold the company in 2000. So as I say, what made us famous was local area networking, and then the internet, and then I got out of the industry. And
when you exited, you obviously started as a one-man band.
Yep.
And when you exited, how big was the company?
So people-wise, we had about 1,400 people, Australia and New Zealand wide. We had offices in every state of Australia and New Zealand. We did about $700 million revenue, about $45 million of profit. And I always pride myself on the fact that we had no external debt, and we were profitable since the day I started. And it was a different business because I wasn't investing in my own R&D like what a Canva and Atlassian would have had to do. We were bringing in products from the US. So our brand was, we delivered what I called legendary customer service. So every business, as I said, has its own challenges. When you're building your own IP, there's a lot of investment that has to go into research and development to develop the product, to then build your brand, to win those first few customers and convince them that the easy decision is to go with the big global US company. The right decision is to give this little Australian company a go, and I didn't have to do that. But the more successful the company was that we represented, the more distributors they would have in Australia. So, the product that put me on the map was Novell, and I became the second distributor in Australia. And so we were competing, selling the exact same product as our competitor. And actually, Novell recognized our amazing performance by appointing 2 more distributors 6 months after we were a distributor. So it went from 1 to 2 to 4 selling the identical product. We never lost our 70% market share. And I always said the only way we could differentiate ourselves were by the people that were selling and supporting that product. And I've always believed that customer service, I used to call it legendary customer service in my day. I know that Jeff Bezos calls it fanatical customer service. And I think the difference was probably about $1 trillion. We exited for $1 billion, and I think Amazon's worth about $1 trillion today. So I should have tried Fanatical. But seriously, I really think if you always think about experiences, all of us are customers at one point in time or another. And I really believe you'll always pay a premium when you get exceptional customer service, when you know you're going to get taken care of. And I just know that if you deliver exceptional customer service, no matter what you do, you will refer people and say, if you're looking for someone, you should work with Jack. I mean, I built a house. We're chatting about property. I met my builder through my business partner. I met my builder. His name's Ron Conti, and I said to Ron, "How'd you work?" He said, "Dave, it's got to be fair for you, and it's got to be fair for me." And we shook hands, and that was my contract. I'm the only guy who's ever built a house without a contract. That was in 2000, and in 2018, I built again. Who did I use? Ron Conti. Okay. I didn't even go to tender. I didn't even go because I just knew that in the 13 years I lived in my previous house, if there was ever an issue, I would pick up the phone, and Ron was always there to sort out whatever needed to be sorted out. And on top of it, he'd never give me a bill. It almost became embarrassing for me to call him. But in addition to that, I can honestly say I would have referred 6 or 7 large building projects to Ron Conti because I knew I wouldn't let the person down who I'd recommended Ron to. And I think so it doesn't matter whether you're in building, whether you're in technology, whether you have a restaurant. If you deliver legendary customer service, you got a bloody good chance of succeeding.
And in today's world, they call that brand, right? When you've got a reputation or a brand that you're good at what you do or the best at what you do.
And it's so much easier to build a brand today than it was in the past because of social media, but it's so much easier to destroy a brand because of social media. So yeah, I mean, if you consider how quickly Afterpay was able to build a brand in Australia compared to what a traditional lending or they may say a marketing company, they're not a lending company, but whatever they are, but if you consider what it would have taken for a Latitude or a Bank of Queensland, etc., to build a national brand compared to what it took an Afterpay, social media's changed everything, and your brand is everything.
That's so true that you said it's much easier to destroy a brand now, just as easy it is to build one.
Yep.
What was life like when you were building Comtech? Because 0 to say 1,500 staff in the early 2000s would have been one of Australia's largest companies.
Well, I'd say in the tech industry we were definitely one of the largest. Probably companies like IBM and Hewlett Packard may have employed more people, but I think we would have been definitely in the top 5 in terms of number of employers. But what I'm proud of is we were always voted as the #1 company to work for, even as we grew at that rapid rate. So we grew from 1 person in 1987 to about 240 people in 1996, which was actually quite manageable growth. And 240 people over 10 years. I knew every single person's name in that company. I knew their partner's name. I sometimes knew their children's name. But in 1996, we opened a new line of business. We actually started providing integration services to the biggest companies in Australia, and so we were putting in networks for Woolworths, for Telstra's, for Coles, for ANZ banks. Those were our customers, and we grew. In 1996, we added 1,000 people, and that nearly killed me. And that was really, really hard work. And and I think probably those 4 years between 96 and 2000, when I sold the business, were probably the toughest years. Because of the growth that we went through.
What was so tough about the growth? Because I know myself, I'm very guilty of this. Growth hypothetically sounds incredible, right? More money, bigger company, more significance, but the reality of it is a lot different.
So So I was always, I always said we genuinely take care of our customers, our staff, and our business partners, or someone else will. That was, never did I hit the table and say we're going to be 1,000-person company, we're going to be a $500 million company, because I often think you have egg on your face. I always say if we genuinely deliver on those three things, we're probably going to grow as a consequence. Okay, because we were in an industry that was growing unbelievably rapidly, and if we were the best in our industry, we were just going to grow with the industry. And by the way, I always say taking care of your customers, your staff, and your business partners would be unbelievably easy if you didn't have this juggling ball here called cash flow and profitability. You could go and say to your staff, market-related salaries are $100,000, but we're going to pay $200,000. Most companies give 4 weeks leave. We're going to give you 8 weeks leave. You'd be an amazing company to work for about 6 months, and I'd have your CV absolutely up to date, because you're probably going to need to get a new job. So what management's about, and I think what a lot of founders today are finding out pretty quickly, is it can't just be growth at all costs. It's how do you grow and make a buck at the same time. You can't keep relying on venture capital or to keep tipping in cash if there's absolutely no visibility of profitability in sight. So as I say, I would rather not have grown. I didn't want to grow at the expense of compromising on our customer and staff satisfaction. But I just always believed, and always worked for me, was that if we truly delivered on that, if our customers loved working with us and our staff loved coming to work every day, we were probably going to get the lion's share of the market.
And that sounds like it come to fruition.
Yeah, I think, I can say for most companies that I've worked with, nothing's changed. And that I must say, one of the reasons I did eventually publish the book, because I wrote the book in 2019, but it took me 2 years to have the courage to publish it. And because I thought, who the hell would want to read some has-beens book when there's been such amazing success in Australia, like Canva, Afterpay, WiseTech, Atlassian, Aconex. There's so many great successful companies. I thought, I'm not going to do this book. And then actually a friend of mine who's a paraplegic, got knocked off his bicycle, and he wrote a book called Change, and how he had to adapt his life from being an able-bodied person to a special needs person. And he gave me his book, and I said, geez, Johnny, I love your book. I love the format. And I told him I've written a book. And he said, Dave, you've got to promise me you're going to speak to the lady who helped me edit my book, and you're going to go and see her. So I phoned this lady, Diana Hill, and I said, what'll it cost you? It's $700. There was nothing to lose. And then she said, you've got to dedicate the book to somebody. And I, without even thinking, I had a friend of mine who worked in the company. He was our CFO for about 10 years, a guy, Dan Jarson. And Dan always used to say to me, Dave, you should write a book, you should write a book. And unfortunately, Dan succumbed to mental illness and passed away in 2005. And without even thinking, I always say, which is not true, my wife said, to my wonderful wife, Colleen, who I could never have done, because she loved Dan as well. And I dedicated the book to Dan and donated 100% of the proceeds of the original book to Black Dog. But why I did it was, if I look back on my career, and I have, and I think what age, the only benefit of age is experience. And I've worked in a number of companies since Comptech, a speech recognition company called Holly, which was in 2000. Holly, what time does the ferry leave from Circular Quay to Manly? Holly, what will the weather be like? It sounds like Siri or Alexa. It was about 15 years too early. I've worked in the fast food industry with a company called Macromatics. And what I do know is that products come and go. But what hasn't changed is every single company has customers, they have staff, and they have business partners. And how you treat those three constituents will be the difference between building a good company a great company, an irrelevant company, or one that just disappears. And I really believe no matter what happens with artificial intelligence, in 10 years' time, if I'm back in the studio, there will still be businesses that have customers, that have staff, and they still have business partners.
Love, incredible, very good. And it was very touching with the book. Before I go on to the next question, the humility and how humble you are, to build a business which is recognised as Australia's first unicorn. Now there's multiple unicorns, but there was only ever one first. How can or why do you think that to publish a book, for example, with someone who has an incredible track record, you still had that self-doubt or self-talk to yourself that who's going to read this? I'm just a has-been.
I think I always say probably the two biggest compliments that I've ever got was from my best friend who started Nando's. I don't know if you've ever eaten at Nando's.
Many times.
I just made myself...
Can understand why it's a good business.
I just made myself an omelette this morning. I put on some Nando's peri-peri sauce. And so Robbie was the founder of Nando's. My best friend. And to me, the biggest compliment I got was when Robbie said, "Dave, you're still the same David Shein that left South Africa in 1986. Bob Dwyer, who was the coach of the Wallabies when the Wallabies won the World Cup in 1991, was a board member of Comtech. And he said to me, I always say to Bob, I use a bit of poetic license, and I definitely will over here, because I won't use the exact word that he used, but he said, "Dave, what I learned from you is that you don't have to be an arsehole to be successful in business." And I'm really proud of that. And that's, I would hate my oldest friends to say, "David used to be a nice guy." And at the end of the day, everybody's pee is the same color. And anybody, and I think I was lucky enough to have met Bob Dwyer really, really early on in my business career. And Bob went on, so I met a lot of the Wallabies from Bob's era, John Eales and Phil Kearns, phenomenal guys, and none of them had egos. And I've known Ian Chappell, who was the captain of Australia, and Ian has no ego. And I always thought to myself, who would I be to have an ego when these guys have achieved way more than what I've ever achieved? And so I think it was a really, really good experience to be surrounded by people like that who have no ego. And that's, by the way, why I asked them to sit on my board, not because they were the former captain of the Australian cricket team or the coach of the Australian rugby team, because we were culturally aligned, and that's what I wanted our company to be. I wanted our company to be a company where no one had an ego, that everybody in the company felt, no matter where you worked in the organization, nobody was more important than anyone else, that everybody, we were a team. And it didn't matter if you were the best salesperson or the most competent technical engineer in the company. Everybody knew that if you answered a phone or packed a box in a warehouse, that your job was an absolutely important contribution to the company.
And is that something you've had to work on throughout the journey as you start to become more, financially successful?
Money shouldn't make anybody, there's nothing worse than when people change because of a title on their business card or because they've made money. That's, to me, money doesn't make you happy. I mean, money, anyone who says financial security is not important is bullshitting. Just to know that if you want to take your family away for a holiday, if you want to send your kids to private school, if you want to do something that you can afford to do it, is a fantastic peace of mind. But it doesn't make you more important than anybody else. And in fact, I always used to say to my boys, when I die, on my tombstone, they can put from packer to packer, which means that it doesn't matter if I'm speaking to a packer at Woolworths or to James or Kerry Packer, I speak to everybody the same. And that's who I always have been, and who I always want to be. No matter what happens, if a venture capital fund shoots the lights out and I made tripled my money, I'd hate you to say, David used to be a nice guy, before as I say, to me, I want to be the same guy that left South Africa in 1986.
Not many people can say that. Very few. You're starting a business again today.
Was that because none of your listeners have left South Africa in 1986?
I think it's just very, very rare. I think part of, from what I've experienced, part of the potential egos that people have is the fact that as you start to become more well-known and more successful, more and more people try to shit on you. So you sort of build these walls around you and a personality that attaches to that. And then some people obviously let it get the better of them. I would say it's very much the minority that I would have the mentality that you have as opposed to the majority, from my experience. Could be wrong. You're starting a business again in 2023. You're 26 years old again. You've just said that the fundamentals remain the same. You've got customers, you've got staff. Outside of that, maybe the technical side of things, what would you do differently to what you did when you started your business?
Jeez, that's a tough question because it worked out really, really well. I mean, there was mistakes that I made that I said to you early on. I think for that business, as I say, I think the way I started, I wouldn't do anything different. But there were mistakes that I made along the way that I wish I hadn't made. That was, we made, we had the dream team of products for the network and communications industry. And one day I got a call from a supplier, and he said, great news. This was one of the dream team. We've just merged with a company called Wellfleet. And I felt the blood just drain from my body because Wellfleet was Cisco, who was you've probably heard of Cisco. Cisco is a company that's still relevant today. As I said earlier on, there's some companies that you can build a good business, a great business, and an irrelevant company. There's, the two other companies today are irrelevant. But Wellfleet, Synoptics had merged with this company called Wellfleet, and we had to make a choice between going with Wellfleet or the merged company, which became Bain Networks, and Cisco. And I picked the merged company, and it was a really bad mistake. It could have been a catastrophic mistake, and that was one where, I remember going to say to my brother, the day we made the decision, I went to my brother and I said, we made a really bad mistake. And it was too late to change it. Like when you talk about face reality as it is, not as it was or you wish it to be, and then change before you have to, it wasn't something that we could just simply change. We had made our bed, we had to sleep in it. And it really could have put our business into a huge amount of, we literally could have lost the business. And 18 months later, luckily enough, the CEO of Cisco, John Chambers, came to see me and said, look, when you made your decision, it was a very good one. I thought, mate, it was, he was, I told you, I think I'm a good salesman. He is the best tech salesperson in the world. And he said, when you made the decision, the market was here and now it's here. And he said, I want to extend the olive branch and see how we can work together again. And we grabbed the opportunity, by the way, with a bit of resistance at a board level. I actually, at that stage, I could just see what was happening. Our two biggest products, Novell and Bain Networks at that stage, were getting killed by Microsoft and Cisco. And I actually said to our board, even though the company was unbelievably successful at the time I think we're doing $168 million, if I remember correctly, and $14 million of profit. So if you just looked at the fundamentals, it's this looks a great company. But I could just see that what was happening, that our two biggest products were going to get killed by Synoptics, by Cisco and Microsoft. And that was a face reality moment. And I said to our board, I said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I said, and I was the founder, I was the CEO, I was the managing director, and I said, I don't mind taking us over the cliff if I believe in the vision of the company. but I'm not going to take us over the cliff if I don't believe in the vision. And I said, if Novell and Bain Networks have one more bad quarter and Cisco and Microsoft announce record results, either we sign up with Cisco and Microsoft or you need to find a new CEO. And I would have left my own company because I just didn't believe in the vision anymore. And sure enough, the next quarter, Novell, massive layoffs, Bain Networks, massive layoffs, Cisco, record profits, record sales, same with Microsoft. We signed up with them and we became their biggest partners again. But it cost us time in the industry because that was about the same time as the internet happened. We had the opportunity to buy half of Aussie Mail, which was the number one internet service provider at the time. Malcolm Turnbull was actually one of the shareholders. We were offered half of it for almost nothing, but I just didn't have the bandwidth to deal with Cisco trying to kill us on the one hand, and then trying to build another business on the other. So it cost us, a huge lost opportunity of, Aussie Mail got sold for $500 million not long afterwards, and I think we could have, purchased half of it for next to nothing.
And how about something I read, which I may be interpreting wrong, but when you exited out of the company, reflecting back on that now, you sold it, over $1 billion, which is a huge amount of money, and from what I read, larger than you ever thought was potentially possible when you started the company. But reflecting back on it now, your thought was, well, how big could I have built that company? And since people have come to you from advice on a similar thing, should we exit? Should we take money off the table? Should we continue? If you believe the company could have been a $10 billion company or a $20 billion company, potentially you would have stayed on to see how big you could build it.
So I think at the time for me, as I said, we had grown from 240 people to 1,400 people over those 4 years, and I was really, really burnt out. And we had three parts to the business at the time. We had the original distribution business, which was pretty much like an Amazon. It was very systems. You don't know, when you buy from Amazon, you don't really talk to anybody. It's very systems orientated, and but you know that with 99.9% certainty, if you order something from Amazon, you're going to get the right goods the next day, or whenever they tell you they're going to get them. So they would have people working in the background, making sure they've got the right products in stock, that they've got people getting it out the warehouse, etc. But it was a very systems orientated business. We also had a training company where we trained technical people how to install, not how to use Microsoft Word or Excel. It was technical people how to install and administer big networks. Like, as I said, like Woolworths running 1,000 branches, ANZ Bank running the whole bank network. They needed, but the biggest part of our business was our services company. We're rolling out these large systems for some of the biggest companies in Australia. That was the hard business. If I had my way again, I would have sold the training company and the services company and kept the distribution business. And because I was burnt out, but what I really needed was 3 months rest. Not saying at 41 years old, I'm going to do nothing for the rest of my days. And
trip to Bali, maybe.
A trip to Bali, yeah. but a trip to Bali is fantastic because it's a holiday. If your whole life's a holiday, it's not a holiday. It's like, I know a guy who is a really good golfer, and when I asked him, he sold a company. He had a really good exit as well. And I said to him, Brad, how things going? He said, I'm hating my life. I said, why? He said, I'm playing golf every day. I said, but you love golf. He said, I did when it was a hobby. And holidays are amazing because it's a stress relief. It's like you get out of work and you just unwind, and that's why if you were unwound all the time, you wouldn't need a holiday to give you that satisfaction. So I think, as I say, if I turn the clock back, I mean, the company which became known as Express Data, the distribution business, got sold to a company called Dicker Data, and that's an amazingly successful company today. And I think a large part of their success would have come out of a business that they bought for next to nothing. I think they bought Express Data for about $26 million, and yeah, together with the existing business, Dicker Data is worth about $700 or $800 million today. And as I say, I don't want to underestimate. No business is easy, as I said at the outset, but it scales unbelievably well. As opposed to a services company, the better you do in a services company, the more technical staff you have to hire to deliver, to keep delivering on that service.
The more it costs.
The more it costs, and the harder it gets. The harder it gets to say, when you've got 5 amazing people, to get the next 5 people, it gets harder and harder as you grow to get, to keep the quality of staff what it is.
To look after your customers, as
exactly.
You say. So the lesson in that is, maybe reflecting back on the journey now, or someone who's at that crossroads in their life, to, before you make the decision, have a proper break, and then assess it without the stress and the day-to-day of the mundane. Usually that comes with running a company, especially of that scale.
Yeah, I think once again, with hindsight, at 41, I was way too young to be doing nothing, and you only know that when you get to 62. Yeah, and we spoke about Frank earlier on. I mean, Frank's an amazing guy. He's got so much energy, and he's got so many more years ahead of him to do another startup, be an entrepreneur again, and he would have learned so much from what he's built, over the last, of the last 5 or 6 years. So I think take a breather, and don't rush into the first opportunity because you're paranoid about doing nothing. But don't think that you've done your dash, and because you've done one, and you may have been tired and exhausted, which it is. When you put everything into it, the way I put into Comtech, it was exhausting. And I always say I neglected myself, which I'm more proud to say that. I'd much rather say I neglected myself than I neglected my kids. But I did nothing for myself, and I was about 15 kilos heavier, didn't do any exercise, and today I think I have a good balance because, as I say, of the investment I made those first 14 years. So I think I would do things differently then. I think I would put a bit of time into myself. When I ran my own company, maybe because I was a young founder, I always say if I had toothache on Monday, I'd go to the dentist on Saturday, because I was always worried if I left the office on this afternoon at 3, Jack would, whoa, did you see Dave left early? Jack wouldn't have given a damn, okay? But at the time, that's what I thought. I thought, I wanted people to know how committed I was, and which I was, and I still would have been even if I went to the dentist at 3. So, I think I would have given myself a bit of time, but as I said, the work-life balance is more today than what I know. I just say to any of your listeners, if you're going to build a business, understand that there are sacrifices and compromises that you're going to have to make if you want to build a great company. If you want to build a good company or an irrelevant company, it's a lot easier. But if you want to build a great company, it requires a huge investment of your time and effort.
What are the 2 biggest challenges you would say now that young founders are facing?
So right now, I'd say funding, because the market's changed substantially. If you had asked me this question a year ago, I would have said attracting, engaging, and retaining staff. Funding was easier a year ago, and then everything changed with the market. So I think you've really got to be an exceptional founder with a really good idea to be able to attract people to invest in your company. And second of all, it's making sure that the founder understands what their superpower is and what other skills they're going to need to have in that business to succeed. So
funding, and I mean, we just saw that with what I thought was an incredible business in Milk Run, which unfortunately, had to shut up the doors.
Yep.
And I think that's a really good example just on the thing we spoke about prior, which is, had an incredible exit, which a company which is still going, Ben, and went balls to the wall with another startup as well. So didn't just have his time and pack up shop.
And probably because the world changed. You know, I think that if he had set up Milk Run, you know, a couple of years earlier, and was able to, you know, extend the runway out a lot longer, you know, I think venture capital companies would have continued to fund the business, you know, a couple of years ago. But you know, public markets have changed. So if you're a private company, you know, what venture capital companies would be looking at is, when this company exits, they're either going to IPO or they're going to sell to a company that's listed on the Australian Stock Exchange or on NASDAQ. And yeah, it's like if Afterpay had to have done their deal today, it would be a completely different deal to what it was when they did their deal, because the world changed. And so if you compare Afterpay to Zip, two similar companies in terms of what they were trying to do, and Afterpay exited at exactly the right time. The value of the transaction is not what it was at the time, but for the founders, it's still an absolutely incredible outcome.
It's still steak and caviar for most nights.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's before we wrap up, we'll call a spade a spade. You had a huge exit, and you were relatively young when you had it. What was your real estate investing strategy? So obviously you're in venture capital now. I'm assuming you put quite a bit of funds into that. On the real estate side, which is obviously the sector that I work in,
I can see you trying to flog me a property. I'm impressed.
What was the overarching strategy? Because you did one of Sydney's biggest transactions with an $80 million waterfront sale. Was there any other transactions, or was there a strategy around real estate that you used?
No, that's a long story, because we lived in Dover Heights. We had a great house, and I always say if I lived there for the rest of my days. So I lived in a 2-bedroom semi, and I had 2 kids at the time, and it was the backyard. We had a Hills hoist in the backyard, and that literally covered the entire back garden. And I don't think I could look at you in the eye and say I couldn't be happier anywhere in the world if that's where I was for the rest of my days. And I know it was in 1989, because I went back to South Africa to visit my parents. And I grew up on a half an acre in South Africa, which was pretty much, we were middle class, we weren't wealthy, and that was pretty much normal in South Africa. And I'll never forget my son, who was 3.5 at the time, said, "Daddy, why has Grandpa got a park in his house?" and I said to my wife, I said, "Carl, when we get back, we've got to buy a bigger place." And I actually sold some shares in the company to two of my tech guys. I was always felt vulnerable about the tech side, and I wanted to make sure that my tech guys had skin in the game. And I sold some equity to them, and I actually bought this house in Dover Heights, and it was a old 3-bedroom brick house on an eighth of an acre, and I really felt, I remember my brother saying, "Dave, you are made for life." And I said, "Yeah, I am." And that's honestly what how I felt. I really felt like I could not be happier anywhere in the world. And maybe a few years later, we put in a second story, and we had phenomenal memories there. And I always say, my level of happiness, and I literally went, I'd say, if I were to say from a property perspective, from a 1 to a 9 out of 10. And then many years later, we weren't even looking, but I dropped my son somewhere in, you're going to regret asking this question. There's going to be a hell of a long answer for it.
I won't regret it. I enjoy it.
So I was driving past this house, and happened to see there was a house with a tennis court for sale. I don't know why I even mentioned it to my wife, and I said, "I saw there's a house with a tennis." She grew up with a tennis court, and she said, "Let's go and look at it." And went to look at the house, and we'll play tennis every day, Dad. Every day we'll play, and anyway, it was this huge house, like sprawling stairs, swimming pool, tennis court, and family convinced me to buy it, and I loved my home in I literally loved it wasn't a house, it was a home in Dover Heights, and bought this place in Vaucluse, and from the day I moved in, I hated it. If I would be embarrassed to tell anybody that, because as I say, I can't remember if it had 5 or 6 bedrooms, swimming pool, tennis court. It just wasn't me. I just didn't feel like, and that's why, I'd say to anybody, a house doesn't make you happy. It's a home that makes you happy. And from the day I moved in, I just wanted to get out. And as I say, I would not have told anybody, because people may have said, "Well, David's forgotten where he came from." Okay, but I would have gone back to the house that we had in Dover Heights any day of the week. Anyway, maybe 3 years later, we were overseas, was visiting my wife's sister in San Diego, and said to my wife, "I've got to get out of that place. We'll go find a new place." We came home on a Saturday, and a friend of mine's wife said, "Dave, I found your next home." I said, "Where is it?" She said, "It's on Coulon Road." If she had said any other road, I wouldn't have done what I did, because it was a road that I always absolutely loved. And I left my wife with my friend at my house, and I went with his wife, Debbie, went down the road, and it was this old run-down home. It was someone who had been infirmed, and in those days you had to pay land tax on your own home. I don't know if you're aware of that. It was in 2000. So even on not an investment properties, on your own home, you'd pay land tax, and it was maybe $80,000 or $90,000 a year. So this gentleman, I think his name was Mr. Tudor Hope, wanted to sell the property. And I came back, as I said, it was literally like run down. The garden hadn't been mowed but it was on the water. And I said to my wife, I said, "Col, I found our next home." She said, "Well, buy it." The next day, my business partner, Jeff Levy, walked into his business partner's office, a guy, Dave Gonski. I don't know if you've heard of Dave Gonski. He's a fantastic man. Dave, and he saw Dave had a contract on his desk for 13 Coulon Road, Vaucluse. And Dave phoned me up, and he's, as I say, is the nicest man. He's very softly spoken. He said, "Dave, we're not going to compete for this property." I said, "I'll tell you what we're going to do." He says, "You're going to put a number in the envelope. I'm going to put a number in the envelope. Jeff's going to open the envelope, and who's ever willing to bid more at the auction is going to go to the auction." I said, "Dave, I don't want to be arrogant, but I'm going to buy that property." He said, "Dave, it's all yours." It was all mine, not to compete with him at the auction. The day before the auction, my father passed away, and Jeff knew my dad, and I knew would come to the funeral, whereas Dave didn't know my dad. And I phoned Dave Gonski, and I said, "Dave, I've got to ask you a massive favour." He said, "What's the favour?" I said, "You know that house you wanted to buy for yourself? Would you go to the auction and bid for me?" He said, "Of course." I said, "How much must I bid?" I said, "Bid whatever it takes." I said, "But I don't want to read in the newspaper the next day that some idiot overpaid by whatever." And I said, "But don't phone me on the day of the funeral." So Dave called me the next day and says, "Dave, congratulations, you're the proud owner of 13 Coulon Road." And to me, if you want to know what epitomized the gentleman, is Dave Gonski. He could have gone and bought it for himself, and he bought the house that he wanted for me. And so the strategy was, I just loved that street, and it became a very happy home, like the one in Dover Heights. And then we were just made an offer that we couldn't refuse, and our circumstances had changed. Our two of our boys had moved out of home, and we just decided there wasn't a strategy enough. And I think with a home, I never look at a home as, I don't even look, when I look at my assets, I don't look at my home as an asset. It's a quality of life. It's where I live today. It's my builder, an architect, convinced me to put a lift in the house, and I said, "I don't need a lift." I said, "You've got to have a lift in the house." I said, "I'll tell you what, Ron, as long as it fits the coffin, because my next stop's Macquarie Park." I said, "That's so as long as I can put it into the hearse and off to the cemetery, because I'm not moving no matter what." It's a quality of life. It works amazingly well for our family today. with grandkids and with a kid who lives overseas who sometimes comes to visit. So yeah, I think for a home, it shouldn't be a strategy. It should be a quality of life decision as opposed to just looking as an investment decision.
Love that. That just happened to be ultra successful. Outside of the owner-occupier properties, were there any other property investments, or was it all focused business?
It's probably more on business, and once again, going to being the dumbest guy at the table. I don't really understand the stock markets. I've always worked with fund managers who I trust and value, and who've managed some of my money for me.
What haven't I asked you?
Joel, come on, why hasn't he asked me? Emma, you've been around. What questions has he asked other people? You haven't told everyone what a nice shirt I've got.
You are wearing. First comment we both said, what a shirt. But you know the brand Mambo?
Yeah.
My dad used to wear Mambo shirts every time. He wasn't in a work shirt, he'd be in a Mambo shirt. It reminds me of that. There's nothing that you feel like I haven't asked you. We've covered a lot. It's been a very insightful
I just think, look, to me, it's especially for the demographic of your audience. Like I think that this is Australia's an unbelievable opportunity to build. Today you can do anything from Australia. I think a couple of years ago, and I think it's thanks to the legacy that's been left by Atlassian and Canva and Afterpay that
Comtech.
Well, I can't even take credit for that, because today I think you can really build a company from Sydney, from Melbourne, from Newcastle, from any place in Australia, and Australians have got huge credibility overseas with venture capital companies overseas who today, in the past, and that's why I say, in my day, if you wanted to build a business, let's say, Jack, get your butt over to the US and relocate from Newcastle or Sydney to Silicon Valley. Today, I think a VC company, because they've seen how well Australian companies can execute by having the CEOs and founders still based in Australia, like Mel from Canva, like Richard White from WiseTech Global, like Scott, Scott and Mike, half of Afterpay, Anthony's still in Melbourne. I know that Nick spends quite a lot of time in the US, but still calls Australia home. You can build an amazing company. We have the best software engineers over here. We have people who really want to have a go, and if you want to give yourself, have a go, but then, as I say, face reality as it is, not as it was or you wish it to be. Know when it's time to throw in the towel if you're not achieving what you thought you would.
David Shein, absolute gold. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Jack.
This is general advice and does not take into consideration your objectives, situation, or needs. You should consider if this advice is suitable to you or your circumstances, and please read any applicable PDS beforehand. This is a Henderson podcast production.